This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. This week, Kathryn and I are joined by Dr. Martha Hyers, an editor over at Under the Sun Literary Journal, where this week's reading is published. So we are going to get not only the perspective of another writer-reader, but also the perspective of the editor and publisher who worked on this piece. So you can expect some great insights into what goes on behind the scenes when a piece is submitted and the way editors think about their publishing process. Now, this essay, Naming My Father, is about growing up with an autistic parent at a time when nobody really knew what autism is. So if you haven't read the essay yet and you would like to, just head over to storyworkspodcast.com. We've got a link to it in the show notes. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. We have another episode of our Writers Book Club where we look at a short piece of prose and discuss it from a writer's perspective. Today, Kathryn and I are delighted to be joined by Dr. Martha Hyers, who is an editor at Under the Sun Literary Journal, where today's essay, Naming My Father, was published. And it was also the winner of the summer writing contest. So before we introduce the essay, Martha, welcome. We're so happy that you're here.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks, Alida.
Mm-hmm. So this essay is titled Naming My Father by Rensselaer Fuller. And as I mentioned, it's the winner of Under the Sun Summer Writing Contest. So, I always like to start with just first impressions. What stood out to you when you read this piece? How did it impact you just on first glance? So either of you feel free to start the ball rolling.
I was excited to read it. I started within the first couple of paragraphs. This is a topic that, I have some experience with working as a piano teacher with kids with autism. So I was excited to read this from a perspective of, I don't encounter very often, which is a child and a parent with autism or a presumed autism, correct? And so for me, it was a very interesting back and forth read between that personal narrative of her growing up with her father and then the informative part of the history of the diagnosis and kind of what that led to in terms of education and opportunities for these people with autism, broad spectrum of autism. So I found it very fascinating. I enjoyed reading it, and it was both story and informative.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, I think when I first read it, I already knew that the father was autistic, but Martha, I know at Under the Sun, you read pieces blind without any background information. So when you first saw it, you had a title, Naming My Father. You had an opening sentence. I assume it was the same. My father could look at a loose metal bolt and say if it was a 3/8 or a 5/16, but he could not name his 4 daughters unless we were lined up by height. So I'd love to hear what your first impression was when this first crossed your desk.
Do you still hear me fine?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay. I loved the title to start with. And like you, I'm always attracted to a title in a first sentence. And I loved the paradox of the child naming the father. So immediately I was engaged. And then I began, the first sentence also clued me in to a conflict. So I liked that immediately. I didn't think until farther into the essay or story. I kind of interchange those words. So if it's narrative, and I didn't know till farther in that I didn't suspect that he was autistic, but I liked that I didn't know, and my awareness grew as the child's grew. It dawned on me slowly, and I liked that there was the slow reveal. I was captured by the story from the beginning because of the title and the first sentence, and thought it had a very good narrative voice. I was into the conflict. So I was with the writer the whole way. And I really liked it. We had debate about it, and we had multiple readers, and there was the usual conversation, and there was a process in it, but I was happy that it won the contest. It was I didn't read for the contest. We have summer readers, but I secretly read it, but I kept my mouth shut. But then after the contest, after the contest, it went to the judge. The top 5 did, and chosen also blind by someone by the previous winner of the previous summer's contest. And I was happy that she chose that one. There were other strong ones, but that one spoke to my heart, so I was glad. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that journey of discovery that you mentioned taking along with the narrator of this piece is something I didn't get to experience fully because I already knew that the father has autism. And I'm not sure if it was because I looked at the comments before I read the piece or where I picked that up. But I think that's a really interesting thing we might want to touch on as writers talking about craft, is taking our readers on a narrative journey and on a process of discovery.
I think it's always going to depend on your reader too, because like I read the first paragraph, and then what's the second like sections immediately is talking about the discovery of autism, and I was like, blink, right? Like there was the connection for me. And so I don't know if the structurally wise, depending on your reader, that might not come as a surprise that you're combining the two of them, right? That she's trying to kind of self-diagnose her father with autism. I think you still get a really interesting journey, even knowing what the ending is. And I wasn't expecting him to not officially get diagnosed, that this is something that she has come to peace with herself, rather than like having it be an official thing. So I think depending on how you're informing your reader, who your reader is, I think the journey is going to be encountered differently, but that you still get that narrative trail of herself, wanting her father's love, realizing what that means, and then coming through on the other end, realizing he really did love her. And I think that for me was the journey, not the discovery of autism, right? But the discovery of what love meant to him and the peace that she could get out of that discovery.
My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. In December, I'll be giving my subscribers 21 Reasons to Pause. From December 1st through the winter solstice on the 21st, subscribers will receive a daily writing prompt and tip as an invitation to slow down and take 15 minutes out of the bustle of the holiday season to reflect and unwind. Prompts will be geared toward connecting with your memories and telling your stories, whether for yourself, your loved ones, or the world. It's perfect for everyone, writer or not. Right now, an annual subscription is 20% off and makes a nice gift for anyone who enjoys reflections on life, writing, and the writing life. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com.
And I agree with that, Kathryn. I think the important change is within the narrator emotionally too. The one that really resonates.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah. I love what you were saying there, Kathryn, because we talked so much on the podcast about the thematic about and the plot about, and of course this is an essay, it's CNF, but and as Martha said, the change happens in the narrator, and that's the part that's moving. That's the journey that we're taking, is this daughter trying to understand her father and asking, does he love me? Is this what it's like to be loved by a father, by my father? And then ultimately having to make up her own mind because her father is never going to be able to show her in the ways that we expect to be shown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, it's CNF, but you still have the thematic journey and the plot journey. The plot journey being the autism and the thematic journey being the family. So
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Was the so Martha, you mentioned to me before the show that you saw some different versions of this essay that you asked for edits. So I'm curious if the original essay had the same structure as the one that won the contest with the daughter's journey and then some of the history of autism woven together like this.
It more or less did. And honestly, I would have been happy for us to just publish it as it came in with only going to the copy editor. But we take our conversation seriously and our publication process seriously. We think it's a dialogue. And so we considered everything and we sent some suggestions to Ren. The two main suggestions, and the first one I didn't agree with. This was that something about why she didn't mention that she knew this sooner. And I said, well, I think about the autism that they thought, well, this has it's been known for a while. And I said, well, no, I don't think so. And I think that the essay itself shows it's been a journey of understanding. And I said, besides, fashions come and go in psychology and in the medical world. And I mean, anybody ever heard of hysteria in the 21st or the 20th century? No, so the labels come and go. And the behaviors, the feelings, the things people do, the way they think, they're all still there, but they go through different. So I said, I think it's actually very accurate in how it shows, it's a picture of the times and the understanding of autism or the labeling of it. And I think she grows right along with that journey. So I disagreed with that, but we threw that out to her. So I think there may have been a few minor changes, but not much on that. I think we stayed with that. The other suggestion was one to braid the essay more with little vignettes or details about crocodiles' lives, because he mentions that. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thought. And so we sent that to Ren, and she sent a version back that was it had more of those. But we read it, sat with it, and lived with it. And we decided in a way that distanced the voice more than it needed to. I mean, what was wrong with it? Wasn't broke, so why fix it too much, Right. And so we left some. We left some of that in, but we toned it down some. So I think there are in the final version we published, there are a few more crocodile references, but not as many as in our discussion, readers and editors we kind of sent to her to suggest. I don't think it was a bad experience for her to work with that and experiment, but in the end, a consensus prevailed that it was pretty much fine to begin with.
Right. What was the thinking behind that crocodile suggestion? Were people thinking that there would maybe be a metaphor or a parallel for the father relationships there?
Possibly could be worked into that. I think they were just intrigued by the beauty of the metaphor and the fact that this was the significant relationship of this young child with his crocodile. And I think they thought there was some kind of truth to be found there. And I can't speak for the people who suggested this, but I just thought the idea was intriguing enough. I said, well, sure. Why don't we send her that and see what happens?
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think it would. I think the additions worked more on the cognitive level than they did on the emotional level, because yeah, I mean, it's talking about different types of brains and thinkings, and that's fine. That's useful information, but I don't know that this essay truly needed that.
Yeah, well, I would say that the crocodile and the alligator, whatever, the pet situation with the father would have turned it more into a story about the father, and this was really her story. I don't know that she could have been really true to, what that relationship was like for him, especially since it seemed like they were so estranged later in life. So yeah, like you said, it would have been a different cognitive experience, like trying to get into his head and why that was significant versus just leaving it on that in her experience.
Yes. And so I think that's good for any writer to hold on to. You have critics for your work whenever you send it in. They're not always right, or it's not always what's right for you. So, but I think it's fine if a conversation evolves too. So,
well, and like you said, it's like, it's good for the writer to experiment. Like it could have been really, really good. And it could have come out that instead we're exploring this from a completely different angle, but it wasn't. So that's good. She got the chance to experiment.
It could. She had the ultimate authority. Besides, she won the contest. She won the contest, basically. So we were going to publish it however she wanted to do it. But generally, our journal's policy is if we accept something, we continue the conversation sometimes, but the writer always has the ultimate authority of the decisions. We frame it as a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the alligator for so many reasons. I think it was such an interesting time capsule planted within this essay that in the 1940s, gator farms in Louisiana shipped live baby alligators through the mail. Okay, how bizarre, first off. And then $1.50 for an 8-inch specimen. Okay. And then her grandparents had one shipped to Los Angeles and gave it to the narrator's father for his 10th birthday. Like, I can't imagine giving my child a pet alligator. I guess people did that in the 40s.
And even later. I mean, I'm older than both of you, but I remember when this happened as a young child, and I don't think I'm quite as old as her, but I'm in between there. And I'm curious, had either one of you heard of this before?
I don't know that I've heard of this precisely or thought that people would give them to children as pets. You think there are always those people who want a wild animal as a pet, an exotic pet, but then there's the urban legend of the alligators in the sewer. Maybe not such a legend. Maybe baby Al was growing up and dad flushed it,
Right. Those two things are definitely linked. That's one of the sources of that legend.
Yes. And then the essay gives us this beautiful description. I'll just read it here. The alligator was your daddy's best friend, said my grandma Leela. Baby alligators walk with their heads raised up, high-stepping their feet and slapping them flat on the ground. In a black and white photo, my 10-year-old father wore his hair slicked back. He crawled behind Al, both of them with heads held high and legs raised up for the next step. And it's so evocative of this relationship between the child, who we know is autistic, whether we've realized it quite at that moment or not, we're going to know he's autistic, and the way he relates to people is very different. His best friend is the alligator. It confounds his mother. And then we get this great visual of the walking together and the high step, and that echoes through the essay. The father's flat-footed step is referenced multiple times, and it's such a subtle detail. Instead of bringing up Al, the alligator, again, it's the footsteps, and right away I see this child with a pet alligator so subtly, so well done.
The slicked back hair. It's all control, right?
Yes, I definitely.
Yeah.
Another detail that I loved was the spelling of the words, and like when she talks about memorizing the books of the Bible, and then he has her sister call him out by the by the word, right? Or by the letter, right? So starting with C, starting with H. And I love that her father has this playfulness that no one else understands, right? And she wants to explain to the lady down the pew, oh, he's spelling Christmas. But but she can't because she doesn't even understand it fully. But like he's trying to engage with them in the way that he understands and being playful, but that she doesn't understand that until much, much later. But I love seeing that seeded in through there, the way that he teaches them, the way that he interacts with them. He's trying to be playful, but he just doesn't fully understand how. Kind of like he's walking behind the alligator, he's spelling Christmas in Bible books. Like it's just different than what other people would do, and it's done so beautifully and so well. So you just see it happening. You see him sitting in that pew. Give me the books that start with a C, as he's laughing about it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of good showing throughout the essay. You know, the show versus very much in scene, many different places like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kathryn and I were mentioning to each other before the call that in reading the comments on Under the Sun for this essay, it was very impactful, and I think emotionally impacting the readers. And when you read this essay, I think there's a real restraint here. We've got the historical portrait of autism and its treatment by the medical system, by teachers, by therapists, and some of that is certainly shocking. And when we read about her relationship with her father, I felt as a reader anyway, that it was being shown to me almost like reportage. You know, she has sentences like, I loved him. I wanted him to love me. This is what it must be like for my father to love me or to be loved by a father. But there was nothing, you know, overwrought. There was no like, I don't know. I think it was just such a great example of how the author is presenting this emotional situation to the reader without dumping a lot of emotion on the page and letting us see it and then respond to it. So
I think so too. I think she does a good job of showing that through the details of dressing up to go out for this date night with her dad and how that doesn't work. But her eagerness is shown so much, and not just hers, the eagerness of her sisters. To tell me afterwards, how did that go? You know, and how they hope at the wedding, you know, they're going to be able to make a contact with them and walk across in public and to try to make a contact. He turns around, but she shows her attempt so many times. Mm-hmm. I think I felt what the narrator was feeling when she's watching her friend in the scene with the leaves and the fall playing in the leaves with her father. I think I just felt that so much. I was seeing the scene so much, and through the maybe because it's where she placed that in the narrative, you'd already seen her expectation in so many other ways and her fear. But then at that point, I so much felt her loneliness, you know, her desire to have just one moment of connection with her father that she could understand. Mm-hmm. Like he would listen back, you know, and listen to her, or talk back to what she said. Yeah. In that scene, I ached with her. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. You get this kind of mature reflection on her emotions through the whole thing. And I think for me, the most impactful part, I mean, as it probably should be, was the last couple paragraphs. And that's where it kind of like smacked me. So do you mind if I read it, Alida?
Please do.
All right. It says, I'm glad my father was not diagnosed with autism when he was a child, that he was not taken from his parents and did not have electrodes taped onto his skin. I wish his only friend when he was young had not been Al, the baby alligator. And I wish my father had learned how to explain what he needed, like the preschool dad who told me to stop waving my hands. You girls look alike to me, my father could have said when my sisters and I were young. Please name yourself, unless all four of you are lined up in birth order. I would have given him my name. every time I saw him, sorry, I'm joking. I would have realized that before he drove up to San Francisco, he must have researched facts about the city as a way of connecting with me. I would have grown up confident he loved me because he must have. He wanted me to know all the countries in the world, all the stories in his Bible, all the histories he could share. He wanted my world to be bigger, which is what we want for those we love.
Yes.
And that for me is like, that was it right there.
It is. And that's the healing for the narrator. That's what we get sometimes. Sometimes the person dies, but we can get that inner healing. So yes.
Yeah. So what would you say about the craft that we're talking about here, if we wanted to get into the craft a little bit for our listeners and give some insight into why this works so well, how we might go about practicing this in our own narratives, this balance of the factual and the historical and the personal, the emotional with the restraint, and letting the reader feel without forcing your feelings onto the page, or balancing your feelings back then with your mature perspective now. I think there are a lot of different ways to look at this topic. So with that, I'll open it up to both of you to start us digging into the craft side.
That's a really good question. And this is one I guess I'd love to ask Ren herself. And in what sense writing this was a journey of discovery. I don't know how far along she was emotionally in coming to the conclusions she came to throughout the essay. And I wonder how much the crafting of it brought that to her. I don't know, but I felt that she'd already, or at some point in the writing or crafting of it, she'd come to such a generous awareness. She doesn't hit you on your head with it. She's just a generous person, I think, and a generous narrator. And I don't know. The story kind of shows her starting off as a generous person, though. So it's the awareness she comes to. To me, I've already said some of the things I think that work well as craft. So I like the beginning and staying in scene and having a turn in it. But I'd love to hear what you say.
Yeah. I think, so I'm going to dip back a month and talk about Fiesta 1980 for a second. So in that, we get that flash forward halfway through where he's like, and we all turned out fine. Right. Kind of a feeling. And this did not do that. It waited until the end. And I think this is a situation where in the journey, we didn't want to be interrupted. We had to go along each step with her in order to have that impact at the end. I think if she had short circuited this and said halfway through, I'm diagnosing my dad with autism and this is why ... in one of those informative parts, it would have broken that emotional journey. So this is where, in Fiesta 1980, that worked great. It kept us in emotionally because we wanted to know that everything was going to work out. Here, we needed to understand the depth of the pain and the loneliness and the estrangement and walk that path with her to come to a peace about it. So I feel like don't short circuit the journey that you're on. And then go back and evaluate, like, where is that emotional arc for the reader as they're journeying along with you. And to me, I agree, Martha, I think this sounded like a journal, right? Like she's journaling these moments and then she pulled the ones that were the most pertinent. And that realization, I totally could see her journaling her way to a realization of like, oh my gosh, he loved me. Right. And then backtrack that along, like where were those, hints, those clues, or those hurts that really caused that journey to take place. So
Right. And in this case, do you think, well, a flash forward wouldn't work at all anyway, because
No.
it doesn't turn out okay.
Right. Exactly.
The changes within the narrator. And so.
Yeah, it's all internal.
Uh-huh.
Situation change instead of an external one. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think part of the power that I was feeling was that the effects of the father's autism on the family are so far reaching. There's the narrator, but then there are also three sisters, and there's a mother. And as we go through this process of growing up and having more experience with the father, being able to name the girls when they're lined up by height, it can almost be kind of cute. You can chuckle a little bit at that, but then when you get further down the line and it's, well, I can't invite him to my wedding because it's too hard to have him there, and mom gets a divorce, and being in the middle of the two parents and needing a code word for your mom when you don't want to talk about something, and then her own work as an educator with children with special needs and such. It's like the story starts in this very intimate space of the father-daughter relationship in the nuclear home back in this time decades before, and then we go through a history and we get more and more, and it gets bigger and bigger. And I think that sense of grief expands along with the narrator's world as she becomes a woman, and as she gets further ahead into her life, but still that primary relationship with the parent, with the father, it is what it is.
Yeah. And the way that she presents it, now this may not be true, but the way she presents it is she's really the only one still wrestling with it. Like, her sisters seem to have just written him off. Her mom's just deep in her bitterness, right? And so she seems to be the only one in her own life that's still struggling with this father-daughter relationship and wanting to figure it out, which again adds to that sense of loneliness and sense of isolation, even within all of these relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So thinking about it from the writer's perspective, Kathryn, you mentioned not interrupting your emotional journey using something like a flash forward where it's not going to work. And then we've got this sense of scale and progression as we move through this character's life. Is there anything else?
Journaling aspect of it kind of feels like a personal journal.
Yeah. Yeah. So she's really bringing the reader into her own process of discovery, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She gives it a very intimate feel because we are privileged to go on this journey with her. Yeah. The journey of the daughter, really.
Yeah. Creative nonfiction working its magic.
Yes. Yeah. Martha, I want to open it up to you. What do you want to say about this piece, or the process of reviewing it at Under the Sun? You've got the behind the scenes perspective here on this essay's journey to publication. So,
well, I hope its journey is not finished. I think this essay has so much to say to other people who've lived similar journeys and those who haven't. And so I just hope it keeps getting out there, and I thank you for being part of that and for being part of the discussion. And as I say, this one got nearly unanimous feedback from our readers, and so that's just what we go with it. And the way we used to, this gets a little bit off the track, but the way we used to solicit feedback from our readers was that the readers didn't see the other readers' feedback before they commented. And that was just more work for the editor, the previous editor, and then for me, because we didn't do it on a discussion platform like Zoom. And we're not Zoom, what I'm trying to say, Submittable. So on Submittable, the comments are visible to everyone else. And I personally think you get a more honest reaction and a clean reaction if you don't see other people's comments, because there's the power of influence. I mean, somebody says something, so you're not just responding to what you're reading, you're responding. Your thoughts are colored by the other person, and then you're also responding to the other commenters. That has a good side to it, and it does increase the discussion level. But I'm just sorry that I couldn't send it out to everybody completely cold and everybody right back yes. But as I say, it had nearly unanimous support, and I think that was genuine, and there were just the few comments from people about what could be done differently, but they weren't major. This was not the first time Wren had submitted to us. This is the first time we published her, but we had submitted to, she had submitted to us in previous years, and we do give good feedback at our journal. I would welcome your listeners to submit to us. Most people like that, but we not everybody. I mean, there's 1 or 2% of people don't want to hear it. Just give me a form letter. But we had in the past responded to something she'd written that I liked very well. But this was much more. She was much more in this essay than the previous one she had sent us, which was. It's probably published somewhere now, and I liked it too. But it was more about her work as a teacher, working with students. But here, she was very much in the story herself, and with restraint, as you say. But it gave a perspective that was important. That was that I saw was lacking from the first thing she had submitted to us, which focused very well on the other characters, but less so about her. So because of that, there was much more of an arc because she was starting at point A and going to point C. And so it was a positive. We gave her feedback. We sent it out to the fall readers too, just because we wanted them to read it. Summer's readers responded. And then the fall readers also responded really well. We knew we would publish this one because it won, but enjoyed working with Wren. She's a wonderful writer and good to correspond with, and I look forward to the next thing she writes. And she's based in Seattle. Do you know her through social media?
I do not. No.
We have Seattle has a good, strong writing community, just as Minneapolis does. Yeah, and people who live these places are blessed. But we get a lot of nice submissions from Seattle, and she's in that community, and she has a strong presence, I think, on social media. But I look forward to books that she writes, and hope she will send us more. And I hope this will be even more widely published, and that it will find its way to audiences where this is very relevant to the lives of the people who read it. It has universal appeal. It's good for a general audience, but
right.
Sometimes you don't hear the things until decades later that I wish that, and now, there are labels, not that labels are always good, but you can say, well, my parent is autistic and understand, but I'm not sure everybody gets that understanding. I wish this could go and reach to the young people who need it, who are in similar situations. There are people out there now with other conditions that don't have a label, and so I just wish the young and the hurting and the lonely could get this. And I don't know how that happens unless you're teaching school and you have them read it. And
right.
This is not a work that's going to. This would be generally accepted all over the country. It's not a topic that a teacher would want to hide from her students. Mm-hmm. That's a benefit. I mean, nowadays people have to worry about things like that. But but this would be accessible and could help people. Mm-hmm. Besides move them.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yes, I think it's interesting the bringing up the label for her father's condition. I think if she had never been able to label her father as autistic or having Asperger's, then she might never come to that point of accepting him as loving her, because it would just be this way Dad was. And, instead of understanding there's this reason why some people relate to people in certain ways, then Dad would just be unique. He would be this anomaly. And then what do you make of that? So I think the weaving together of the history of autism with her personal journey and the way the two dovetail because of her age and where she and her father were in time, along with the medical changes, is even more significant than I think, I thought about initially. Just when you mention that, the labeling, I was like, oh, exactly. That was a big moment, I think, for her when she and her sisters have that conversation about, I think Dad's autistic.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, any other thoughts about this essay from either of you as we wrap it up? Okay. Well, Martha, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights about this piece. It has been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much for being here and for your show and for letting me be part of it.
Of course. And why don't you tell everybody where to go to find Under the Sun online? And
right,
because I would love for people to submit.
Oh, yes. Sure. We're on Submittable and underthesunonline.com. And our reading period will go until January 2nd. We give good feedback that shows you've actually been read. And so, and I always tell our submitters, you don't have to believe all of this. We're all flawed, and these are just some flawed readers. But the feedback is good. Our readers are good, and they're getting better over time, and good insights. Most of them are themselves writers. Some of them we've published in the past, and then we just want to be part of our reading community. We're not going to publish anymore, but we support each other, and so we comment on craft. We comment on where something engaged us and where something lost us, and what we like, and so you just get detailed feedback from us. And as someone who writes herself, I appreciate that, because I'm very tired of form letters. Now, on the CLMP listserv, I see that we're not unique in giving this good feedback. There are other journals out there that definitely do that, and especially I think if the readers or the editors like a piece, they will give feedback. But too. So
yes, well, I've never encountered such a generous journal because of such a generous editorial staff as Under the Sun. You not only give feedback, it's included with the submission. You don't have, you go to Submittable in so many journals, you can submit for $3 or $5, but then if you want feedback, it's $10 or $20 kind of a thing. And so
I think that's a scam, personally.
Yeah,
that's about it. As a writer submitter myself, I'm not going to pay for that.
Right.
No,
Me too.
I will get it from my fellow and sister readers at Under the Sun, but I'm just not going to do that. And
right.
No, I mean, it's hard enough to write anyway. It's hard enough just to feel like, you're read, and it seems it's human. And why should everything be monetized and be, in here we are in late capitalism? Why should we be a party to that? Why can't we salmon swimming upstream? Why can't we? I have to say something that there are things I treasure in my heart, as everyone does. And one letter we sent out is a rejection letter and a decline letter. I suppose that's the business these days, to a writer. And he'd been published, I think, pretty widely before books, etc. But he wrote back and he said, "Thank you very much. I don't get acceptance letters that are this good." So
I believe it. Yes. Definitely.
So I treasured that. Yeah, if I were going to submit our journal for a Firecracker Award at CLMP, I would do it on the basis of our process, because that's a lot about what we are. It used to be back in writing programs, it was all about product. And then the decades passed, and in the late 20th century, it was very fashionable to talk about writing as process. That fashion really hasn't gone out of fashion. But to me, publishing is a similar thing. It's not just about product, it's about process. And so but that's not really seen whenever you turn a journal in for a prize. But we do have that. So yeah,
wonderful.
We do something good. The world is in a mess, but this is one good thing I can do.
Our December Writers Book Club selection will be getting us in the holiday spirit with a classic, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I hope you'll give it a read and join us. And if you would like to be at the round table discussing this book with us over Zoom, shoot me an email, alida@storyworkspodcast.com. We would love to have you join us. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.